When it comes to Tesla and Elon Musk, we all have gotten used to crazy things happening that looked like science fiction. It started with SpaceX, where Elon promised us to have a self-landing mega rocket that could transform spaceflight and space travel, and everyone thought he is crazy. Today we have Starship, a completely unprecedented, reusable rocket that truly transforms everything. When it comes to Tesla, he promised us that we would have electric vehicles, which no one even thought possible as a viable alternative for ICE cars. And now we have a revolution going on. The internal combustion engine is completely dead, and it's clear that EVs are here to take over the entire world, and Tesla is a $1.5 trillion company. He also is launching humanoid robots, where everyone thought that's impossible, and now we're in the middle of the greatest robot explosion ever. But there's one thing that so far everyone thought is completely absurd and still thinks is completely absurd. And you know that on my channel I've covered since very recently the flying car situation. Now, you have to understand I'm taking a lot of risks talking about flying cars because here I'm truly an outlier still. Everyone thinks I'm wrong on that, except for Elon, of course, who already said. The Roadster, the famous Tesla Roadster everyone waited for now for 7 years, the next version. I predicted that there is a good chance that the Roadster will be a flying car. Everyone was laughing. And then literally right after I said it, Elon came out and said, no, it is going to fly. And it's going to be the craziest product demo in history, the history of humanity, which is a pretty bold statement. And it confirmed what I already thought is going to happen. And I want to go into quickly why I thought that, why it's a first principle thing, not a random thought I had, why I think flying cars are absolutely unavoidable. They will happen. And why they might happen much faster and sooner than people think. So, first of all, you saw my video probably. Elon Musk confirmed it on Joe Rogan and basically said this thing's going to fly and that they're going to reveal the Roadster in the next 2 months. So very likely this year, he said. Well, we have to take it with a grain of salt. I think it's going to happen in Q1, but maybe it's going to happen this year. So it's going to happen in the next 5 months. And if that's true, and we have this flying Roadster, however this thing looks like, we'll go into some details in a second. The next question, if you follow me to that point, if you don't follow me to this point, well, then just wait. Well, I will be proven right. But the real question is not if this thing flies. Of course it flies. It's, Elon said it. It's now revealed that I was right about it. But the next and most important question about this is this all a party trick? Is this just going to fly a little bit? And it's going to completely be stupid for rich people. Just a little gag on the side. Like Tesla does the real things, robotaxi and Optimus, humanoid robots, autonomous driving and some EVs. And this is just a little joke on the side for his rich friends. Or is this something much, much bigger that no one has on their radar right now? No pun intended. Hey, creating these videos is a lot of work. Please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Now let's get back to the video. Okay, that is the question of this video, where we have to dive into that question. Let's assume I'm right. So you have to follow me to this point. Of course I'm right. It's obvious that I'm right, that this thing is going to fly. So this is really about this question. Joke or not joke? Is this a party trick or is it something else? Of course, everyone thinks, who follows me to this point, of course it's a party trick. What do you think, Joe? They will make it fly for 10 minutes, for 5 minutes. It's going to cost $500,000. And then rich people can fly for 5 minutes and show off to their friends, okay? Okay, but let's think about this a little bit more. Let me share some things that Elon said in the past. Because Elon is important in this whole equation, obviously, because he's in charge. So we have to understand what Elon thinks. I want you to follow me to this point here. Sam Koros of ARK Invest, I think he's not with ARK anymore. I know Sam. I knew Sam back then. I think he changed to another firm, but doesn't matter. He said, why does Musk keep hinting at his excitement for an electric jet? Not a flying car at this point, but an electric jet, okay? Okay, guys. Elon always said everything, all transport will be electrified with the ironic exception of rockets. So including jets and planes, right? In the past, he has said that electric flight starts to get interesting once you hit 400 watt-hours per kilogram, okay? And so here is what Elon said. 400 watt-hours per kilogram. In case you're not an engineer, watt-hours is basically how much energy, how many watt-hours can you put into a kilogram. So basically what that means is 400 watt-hours means you get 400 watts out of 1 kilogram of battery for 1 hour. So for 1 hour, you can stream out 400 watts of electrons per kilogram. Okay. Elon said 400 watt hours per kilogram with high cycle life. So that's very important. You need to be able to recharge this thing like 1,000 times or something. I don't know what exactly the threshold is, but it can't be a battery that works for one charge and then it's dead. It needs to be rechargeable a lot. And produce in volume, not just a lab, is not far, probably 3 to 4 years. So let that sink in. Elon says at that point in time, when we reach that, you can build electric jets. See here. So Elon basically said Jet A kerosene has much higher energy density than lithium ion. So the stuff the liquid fuel you pump into planes has a much higher energy density than lithium ion batteries. But electric motors weigh much less than turbines and convert stored energy to motion better than combustion engines. So he said, yeah, of course, kerosene is much higher density, right? If you fill up the wing of a plane, you get much more energy into this, much more energy into this wing than if you would put batteries in. That's bad for batteries. But on the other side, the weight of batteries is much lower than the combination of the fuel and turbine, and you get better conversion. So he says, basically, this is the crossover point, right? Based on calculations I did 10 years ago, crossover point for lithium ion beating kerosene, where a plane becomes more efficient with battery, is 400 watt hours per kilogram. High cycle batteries are just over 300 watt hour per kilogram, but probably exceed 400 in 5 years. Okay, let that sink in. So Elon said back in the day, not only can you build an electric jet at this point, he said that is the crossover point where it becomes more cost effective and more energy efficient to have electric jets. So Elon has thought about this already a lot. Let that sink in. Now, I want to also share with you guys, where are we today? He said in 2020, 3 to 4 years away. Elon is already a little too fast, right? So he was wrong on that. But now we are basically 5 to 6 years after that. And here's where we are at now. Amprius is one of the best battery companies in the high-tech battery, not in cost efficiency, but in the high-tech battery area, right? And if you go to Amprius and you go to applications, our solutions, and you go to Sycor, for example, right? These batteries, and you see what they can do for electric jets, by the way, and drones. Sycor delivers up to 450 watt hours per kilogram, providing efficient energy storage for applications where energy efficiency is critical. Okay, so these people have the battery today at scale as an industrial solution. I'm just telling you Amprius, there might be others, just to tell you, what's going on. So look, all these guys are using actually Amprius. They're building these little drones in China all over the place, right? For these things, for example. And this is all in the market. I'm just showing you this to show this is not a joke. This is actually happening. And of course in drones, right? Here in drones. So there's always a cost issue, like how much does it cost? But this is not crazy cost. I mean, there might be a few times more expensive than car batteries. So this will initially be a bit. But you see that we crossed the high cycle number and the density threshold. Okay, why am I saying this? Because it means that these cars, flying electric jets, that potentially cars are now technologically feasible, that Elon predicted this in 2020, that he said it's 3 to 4 years away, 2023 to 2024. Now it's 2026, effectively, 2025, 2026. So we are in deep viable territory for electric jets, okay? We also are in deep viable territory in terms of autonomous technology, as we all know, and Tesla knows best. An absolute precondition for flying cars is that they're autonomous, of course, for many reasons, right? You don't want people flying around if you have tens of millions of them in the air. Now, we also are discussing in this video, is this a party trick or not? The Roadster will fly. Mark my words, but much more importantly, mark Elon's words, because I'm not in charge of Tesla, but Elon actually is in charge of Tesla. And he says, he didn't say Jews, right? He probably, I don't know if he read my X tweet or not. But it doesn't matter. Elon said it's going to fly, so it's going to fly. So we have to now remove our doubter hat, put our pioneer hat on, and say flying cars are possible now. From a technological perspective, you can have a passenger put into a thing, have some form of VTOL of propellers and electricity, transport that human The density of batteries is at a point where this becomes economically feasible and now exponentially more feasible in the next couple of years, but we crossed that point and that autonomous technology can do it. So it's all doable now. On a first principle and timeline level, it's not just possible in theory, it's possible in reality now. Okay, so the next question is, I always say that in Pioneerlands, go to pioneerlands.net, join the Pioneer Academy, where we discuss how you build the future and engineer the future so we can understand and predict people like Elon better, people like Jensen Huang, where we prepare for the age of AGI, where we cannot just sit back and be passive little people who don't do anything, but we need to actually think about the world and predict it in accurate ways. So we have to learn how to think accurately, okay? Not like a dummy, but we have to think like a smarty pants. We have to think like someone who is actually right about the future. So let's do this for flying cars. Let's be right and not wrong. Okay, and I want to present some first principles about flying cars. The first thing to understand is when you think about technology, think a little bit about technology until you fully understand the relevant pieces of the technology. And then stop thinking about technology and think about reality. Because in nearly all instances, the technology is a sideshow. It is one core component to predicting the future, but only one of many. The rest will be reality components. How do humans behave? What do humans want? What are human economics? What is politics? What is regulation? How would that actually work? Don't think about a technical flying car. Think about the reality you are creating. What is the reality of flying cars? The everyday reality. You're a soccer mom, you have 2 kids, hopefully a husband, and you're living somewhere in a suburb, New York suburb or something. How does this look like? Where's your flying car? What does it do all day long, right? Where is it? How do we make this feasible? And then we understand the complete reality on a first principle level. This is the first principle reality that will happen. And then we can plug in the technology and see, okay, how does the technology relate to this? And then we know exactly what Elon does because Elon thinks exactly the same way. That is how we can predict what Elon's going to do. Don't try to trail Elon, simulate reality accurately, and you can be pretty sure that Elon comes to the same conclusion independently because that's how it works. So let's do this. Number 1, first principle. Flying cars are inherently superior to terrestrial cars. Okay, the same way EVs are inherently superior to ICE cars because an electric engine is just better in every way. The battery makes it better. We know everything. Like once you have an electric car, it's inherently superior to an ICE car. Once you have a flying car, it's inherently superior to a non-flying car. Number 1, you don't need roads. This is an important non-consumer aspect. A government can save trillions of dollars. Imagine you don't need roads anymore. And we'll get into the details. You still need some roads. But imagine you don't need highways anymore and you don't need overland roads anymore. That saves you trillions in a decade or something. Okay? Of course, it's a much better experience. It is much faster. This thing, let's assume it goes 100 miles an hour, right? Easy to assume. So it's faster than a car. Of course, it's safe in the air, like nothing is going on. We'll get to this in a second. But most importantly, what people don't fully understand, if you fly in a straight line. Imagine, I don't know what city you live in, but just imagine LA. Just imagine you're in Brentwood. No, just imagine you're in like Midtown or something. And you want to go to the valley. How do you even get there? Like, first of all, there's traffic. It's awful. But even without the traffic, while you're in Santa Monica, you want to go to Malibu. Like something like this, you have to have all these curved roads and the stupid hills and all that crap. If you want to go from JFK to Manhattan in New York, the helicopter takes 5 minutes and the car takes 1 hour. Of course, you can argue traffic, but it's also like you can't even go straight. So of course, how do I even have to explain this? Like obviously flying cars are completely superior on that dimension. They're better experience, they're straight lines, they're faster, you save enormous amounts of time. Okay, now let's think about a problem here. Okay, there is one central problem. So this is very easy to understand, this first principle. And everywhere is superior. Now there's one problem. Okay, if you imagine New York, if you imagine LA, I don't go into too many arguments here. I cut it short and tell you right away the takeaway. You cannot have flying cars in densely populated metropolitan areas. Because if you imagine Manhattan and everyone flies around in a car, okay, this is not going to work. Boom. End of story. You can't make it work. Okay, so what do? Here's the solution. And we have to go through this to understand the end point, right? What does that reality of flying car actually looks like? So we can be sure of, this is what we can be sure of. All cars will be flying in the future. It's just a question of technology because everyone wants it. It's superior. And the first principle number 2, that's the first principle number 1. All cars will be flying. No discussion. First principle number 2, cities need driving cars. Also not debatable. You can't have flying cars in LA or in Houston or in London or in Frankfurt or in Berlin. Like, it doesn't work. So once you get into densely populated areas, you need to land your little car, go on the regular streets and drive. I know that might disappoint a lot of people. It's like, dude, this is the whole point, that I can fly from downtown LA to the stupid airport. But no, I mean, if everyone does it, it doesn't work. Of course, some people can fly. Maybe you pay extra money. Maybe there's a corridor from LAX to downtown and to all kinds of places where you're allowed to fly. You just have to pay a lot of money to get your car into that lane. Or if you take a robo flying car, it just costs more. So of course you can fly around Manhattan, but not everyone. There must be some pricing tiers and some coordination, which means most people will have to drive in their robo-taxis, whatever it is. Right? So the mass transport will be on the road. There will be some corridors reserved for a few, maybe pricing regulated, so you pay more to get in. Something like that. Okay. But overland, everyone will fly because there's no problem. The denser it gets, the more people have to drive. The less dense it gets, the more people will fly. At the extremes, everyone will drive. In Manhattan, everyone will fly. In, I don't know, Wyoming. So I think that is inevitably the reality, the future. There's just no way around it. That is exactly what's going to happen. And we can be sure of that. Okay? So how do we solve that? Well, you need an actually flying car. That is why all these passenger drones are a little stupid. Everything that these Chinese companies do, that Joby does, even though it's a great company, that Archer does, this is like child games, child's play. That's how you say it. Child's play. Because you can never have tens of millions of these or hundreds of millions. It's just not possible. If you want hundreds of millions of these things, they need to be actually flying cars. They need to be things that fly and drive, that are great cars and great little drones, passenger drones. Okay? Now this already exists as prototypes. I will show you something just for fun. I will show you something, and don't laugh. This is just a prototype that the Chinese developed, but I think it's brilliant because it tells you what's going on. Look at this. Do you see what's going on here? You see how the little Chinese designed it. It's hidden in the roof. I'm not saying this is exactly how it has to be, but you get the point. The Chinese can already build this thing. And by the way, this flies. This thing already flies. Okay? So it's a cool looking car. It probably drives decently. It expands with the rotors. This all makes, physics sense. So it is able to drive, to fly. And it's pretty crazy. Look at this. And then it can just, and they are producing these. So this company is actually a car, Xpeng. So I'm showing you this more as a feasibility, show feasibility. And look at this. Look at this. So why do I show you this? Okay, why do I show you this? I show you this to demonstrate that, of course, it's possible. You already saw, the Chinese already do it. This thing already flies. They proved the rotors are the right size. Now you just have to make them foldable. They showed they have other rotors that are the same size that are foldable. So now it's just an optimization issue, right? Okay, optimize it. I did some math on it. I don't want to present the whole math, but the bottom line is with a 160 kilowatt hour battery, you're fine. You can make this thing weigh less than 1,800 kilograms. You would have already today, you would, with a full 1,800 kilogram thing, which is pretty serious, right? If you have high-tech materials, you can make a pretty good supercar that has an acceleration under 3 seconds on the road and has the rotors and would fly roughly 10 minutes while allowing you to still have a 100-kilometer range left with the flight on the road. So that's not perfect. That is not scalable. That's not mass. But dudes, think about it. You can have a 100-kilometer range, including 10 minutes of full flight in an 1,800-kilogram car, and it works. Think about it. Let that sink in. And so how hard is it from here? And 100 kilometers range is more than you need, because if you wouldn't fly, that means 600, 700 kilometers. So it's a giant range, but if you decide to fly, you can fly for 10 minutes and still drive around for 100 kilometers. That means we are very close to making this flight 20 minutes and then 40 minutes. And at 40 minutes, it's getting real. At 40 minutes, you have a full flying car. I would say at 30 minutes, you have a full flying car. Okay, so will Tesla do it? And I tell you, I'm at this point completely convinced that there's no way Tesla will not do it. In other words, flying cars are now at the inflection point of possibility, which means within the next 10 to absolutely latest 15 years, we will have mass-produced flying cars. Between 8 and 15 years, I think, depending on what Tesla does, in my opinion. Okay? So Tesla will have to get into this market because you cannot be a car company and not do flying cars if everything becomes a flying car. And Elon will not wait for competitors. He's going to say, when is the right point to do this? So everything is not anymore a question of timing. And a lot of you will think Joe went totally crazy, but I'm just telling you, it's just what's going to happen. And you know my arguments, and you don't have better arguments, so therefore I'm right. And if you think you have better arguments, you don't, because you're going to be wrong. You can think about it. So at that point, it just becomes a question of timing. When is this going to happen? Right? And that was my biggest doubt. That's why I said before Elon said it, I only think it's a 10% chance that this roadster will be hardcore flying. And then he said it, and now I ramped it up to 100%. Okay, because for me, the question is, what is the right realistic target for scale deployment of flying cars? Is it 2050? Is it 2045? Is it 2040? Or is it 2035? I think these are the realistic scales. There is just no way it's going to be later than 2050. There is just no possible way. Okay. If it's faster than 2035, I would say no, because we're talking about tens of millions of these things, like scaled. There's just no possible way that it's before 2035 at scale, right? And I would have said before this whole situation, before I looked deeper into it, I would have guessed 2040 to 2045. I would rather bet on 2045 for the first million flying cars. I changed my tune after doing research, accelerated by 10 years. I now say it's going to happen by 2035. I'm not sure about a million, but potentially a million. Potentially a million flying cars. So basically the inflection point where, okay, now it's game on. By 2040, we have tens of millions of these things. I changed my tune. Okay. So I think that's the realistic trajectory because it's completely feasible now. And if it's completely feasible now, we have 15 years to get this all regulated, or 10 years. That requires, of course, someone taking the lead and pushing really hard. Okay, we need roughly 10 to 12 years from the start of serious development and deployment and prototypes and commercial versions to scale, right? So it takes 10 to 12 years. And if no one does it, of course, this is like infinite timelines and then it will never happen. So here's where it can happen. And here's where we need to start. And if we say 2035, between 2035 and 2040, where this thing becomes vast, like mass commercial, we have to start now. It's that simple. We have to start. We can start now. And let me tell you here my theory, what is going to happen. Well, first, generally, like you have to showcase a prototype so you unlock people's brains like, oh my God, I understand it can happen. That is your year one. Then commercially available, an expensive version with 10 to 20,000 per year produced in year three after this. And you know where I'm going with that, right? I think this is the Roadster. I think the prototype is the Roadster. I think they're aiming at 10,000 a year or something production by year 3, 2028. I think this thing will not be very cheap, $250,000, $500,000, but you can sell definitely 10 to 20,000 a year with these if they fly, because every rich person in the world is going to buy this thing. So then you have basically your mini Roadster. You have your original Tesla Roadster, on a little higher scale in the market, right? And then in year 5, in 2030, you showcase a cheaper prototype that's serious. Maybe 100. That's kind of the Model S of the flying Tesla. 100,000, 250,000 bucks because inflation, blah, blah, blah. Let's say 100,000 plus year 5. Then commercially available in year 7. So that's from year 2032. And you are aiming at 100,000 production per year, maybe 50 to 100,000. So it's scaled. At this point, it's still a regulatory gray zone. It's probably still maybe requiring a pilot license. Maybe at that point, they already have pushed through some form of like special license. It's all possible, right? To scale down pilot licenses, whatever. There's ways of getting this done. But I don't think this will be no additional license required. You will still need some form of pilot license here. You definitely need a pilot license here, or you do it private, or you do it in Dubai. So these numbers actually make sense for this. And then comes the big thing. In year 8 to 9, you show the mass prototype. You make it commercially available in year 10 to 12, so 2035, 2037. And then you go into millions of production. And then everyone has a flying car. Done. Global distribution and lobbying pressure for regulation. So you basically need to create this reality, force politicians to react to it, and then you get your regulation done. The regulation is not very hard. You basically say everyone can use these things. They are mostly autonomous, so you can't even do anything. There will be super robotaxis, flying robotaxis, and driving robotaxis, because they will do both. cities will put in their regulations. They will define the zones where you can fly in straight lines. Maybe all the straight lines will be defined, whatever. Like, this is all easy to figure out in the age of AGI, not hard. On the cities, you just keep it robotaxis on the roads. And at some point, you're allowed to fly. And within cities, you have corridors of flights that have maximum capacities. How many people are allowed to fly? Maybe these corridors are just straight above the roads, right, to just make it safer. So if they ever fall down, they fall on the other cars. Super safe. And that's it. Of course, no one falls down because it's not hard to make these things perfect. Now, in the age of AGI, like, hello, if you can make self-driving cars, you can also make self-flying planes, flying cars. This is all not hard at this point. Not that I'm saying I can do it. I'm saying it's not hard for Tesla. So what is my takeaway for this? Now you get the whole point. My takeaway is this. Important for the stock. Will Tesla do it now? I previously said 10% chance that the Roadster will fly. I change it to 95%. Let's say not 100, but it's 95% sure that in the next 4 months you will see a flying Roadster. The next question is, will this be phase 1 of my crazy Joe plan to make all cars flying? Previously, I would have said, I'm not sure. Now I say there's a 50% chance that this flying Roadster that we will see is not a party trick, which means it's a 50% chance that this will initiate. It will initiate the age of flying cars with Tesla at the helm of this whole operation. There's a 40% chance that we need to wait, that Tesla will do that, actually will do that, but it's a little early and it is kind of a party trick for now, but it triggers them to actually develop that whole thing. So my year 1 for flying car real R&D trajectory for mass deployment is not going to kick off with the Roadster, but 2 years later or something. I think there's a lesser chance for that. Let's put a 40% chance. And there's a 10% chance that Tesla never does it, even though it's guaranteed to happen, the flying car thing. The never chance is very low because Tesla would lose the entire robotaxi business. The entire robotaxi business, effectively. Because if you had the same robotaxi flying, Tesla is toast. So there is a 10% chance that Tesla says, you know what, we just milk robotaxis. If we don't do flying cars, they're not going to happen before 2050. Only Tesla can make it happen by 2035, in my opinion. So maybe someone else can make it happen 10 years later, 15 years later. So Tesla would have time to squeeze out everything out of the autonomy and robotaxis terrestrially, would make trillions and trillions of dollars, and says by then no one cares about robotaxis anymore. We give up our robotaxi business in 2050 to whoever invents the flying cars, and we go with the robots. Doesn't sound like Tesla to me. Also, why would Elon do that? Like, what's cooler than flying cars? Now they're feasible. Obviously, they're going to take over the entire robotaxi market by 2050 latest if Tesla doesn't do anything. If Tesla does something, they could just utterly dominate everyone by 2040 because then they have flying robotaxis. So I think it's a very low chance that Tesla will not do it. 40% chance that they will not start really in earnest doing it now, but there's a 50% chance. This is a crazy prediction. You have to admit it. You have to admit that if Joe is right on this, I get the Nobel Prize for predictions. I say there's a 50% chance, like a high chance, that the Roadster will be the initiation of Tesla's flying car business. Doesn't mean Wall Street understand. They will think now he went crazy. Now Elon went crazy again. But I tell you, if you put together the dots, what Elon said about electric, planes, the flying car logic, the enormous, ridiculous business, the first principle that this has to happen because it's just inherently superior. Flying cars are coming. So that's what we learn in Pioneerlands. Make the right predictions, be clear on the predictions, be accountable so we can actually measure if we were right or wrong. If you think anything I said here doesn't make any sense, make more sense of it and tell me in the comments. But I will push back if I think you're wrong. And use your brain. Be precise and clear. Don't say dumb things. Say smart things. Maybe I overlooked something, right? Make technical arguments. Don't make regulatory arguments. They're dumb. The regulation obviously has to change. You can get a lot of things done with pilot licenses. You can sell 10,000 of these things in the United States alone, just to pilots, by the way, just to pilots, no problem. So in the beginning, pilot licenses are not the problem, but at the second iteration by 2032, you would need new regulations to have mini light pilot licenses, already autonomy, maybe, and have special regulations for autonomous flight vehicles, which you already have a little bit, but there needs to be some things done. And of course, in the end, you need super regulatory overhaul. The FAA has to basically get in bed with NHTSA and create a little baby, a mixed baby, half flying, half highway. So that's my take on it. I hope that was interesting. Let me know what you think, and let's see what the future in Tesla and Elon will bring us. See you very soon.